So it sounds eminently reasonable to me. When he first proposed that, I don't know whether you may know this from him, he's better to say this than I am. But when he first got this idea, then the idea was that it was likely that Earth, Venus, Mars, and Saturn at one point were much closer together and in a what's called a polar alignment, which is, the joke is, it's planets on a shish kebab. So Saturn was the big piece of meat at the end of the shish kebab, and then there was Venus, I guess, and Mars and Earth, maybe somebody else too, I don't know. But he got that idea by reading the ancient myths, the ancient stories written, and some prior to anything being written, the vocal, just the words, the poems that were passed down from person to person, that this is the way things were. They referred to those planets as gods. And the astronomers, of course, laughed at them. It was ridiculous. You can't have a bunch of planets in a shish kebab. That's nuts. It'll fly apart. And there was a fellow by the name of Bob Grubaugh, he's a mathematician, who said, no, Dave, that's a stable configuration. It's just as stable as the rotating disk. And Dave said, oh yeah, really? In fact, by that time, he became so discouraged at the hard time he got from astronomers saying, it's impossible, forget it. He sold his entire library. And it's like the burning of the library at Alexandria. I mean, yeah, that's all of that data, those ancient history of eons and eons of civilizations that have disappeared. But anyway, he got back into it and he said, all right, if you say it's stable, then I'm going to continue to push this. And then a couple of years later, I guess he met up with Wall. Well, I know I first joined this group officially, sort of. I was invited to the year 2000. It was one of these. And we had, that was when Holton Arp, famous astronomer, late guy, he died fairly recently. And Tony Peratt, who was another electrical engineer, he was one of the directors of Los Alamos Laboratory. He came and said, yeah, that's right. And in fact, some of this stuff these ancient petroglyphs that we see carved into the rock walls of canyons here, not only here in Arizona, but all over the world, they look just like what I see in my nuclear lab in Los Alamos. And they're called the Peratt instabilities. And when an Indian carves a horse and somebody with a bow and arrow, that's not too unusual. But when he carves something that looks like a multi-headed snake or a man with two balls on either side of him and a crazy head and maybe he's got an antelope for a head, were they really chewing peyote or what? Why did these guys do this? I mean, it's hard to carve stuff on rock with another rock. And so Tony said, yeah, what these petroglyphs prove is that these tremendous plasma displays did occur in ancient times, and ancient man saw these figures, which he said, I know because I see them in my lab. I know they do occur, but in the lab they're gone in a nanosecond, in a flash. But because this plasma was between maybe Mars and Venus in this polar configuration, that was so much larger that time scales with distance, so that something that could take a nanosecond in the lab might take a year in real time if it's a big thing between planets. You can't ever prove anything in science. You can disprove today's most beloved theory by tomorrow morning's news coming in and say it's all wrong. That's true. So we haven't proved anything, we can't prove anything, but we can certainly put our models through tests. And if our model predicts thus and so, then that's a pretty good indication. It's like a district attorney wants to convict somebody of murder. He can't go back in time. There's no such thing as a time machine. All he can do is he can build a wall of circumstantial evidence that's high enough and thick enough such that the jury says, yeah, beyond a reasonable doubt, this guy probably did it. And that's all we're doing. We're in the process of building that wall, saying, I don't mean wall Thornhill, but a wall of evidence that this is the way things did happen and the way things probably are going to happen and are happening right now. Oh, I think there's no, we're not predicting any fire and brimstone because the system that we have now is so stable that it's probably going to stay this way for a long, long time, longer than 1,000 human lives anyway. I mean, astronomical time is very long. So who can say what would happen if something disturbed it? But it's a lot more stable right now than it was when we were on the shish kebab. That goes without saying. It shouldn't disturb them at all. They cook their toast with an electric toaster every morning. So no, I don't think it's at all mysterious. The astronomy, typical astronomy, has a lot of mysticism about it. I mean, we've got dark matter, we've got dark energy, and you can't see it, and it makes up 90% of it. That's a load of malarkey. That's like your daughter says, yeah, the dog ate my homework, Dad. Yeah, well, did it eat it again like it did last 2 weeks? I mean, there's a level of I guess reality or believability that most of these astronomical theories. I mean, you can't let a week go by that some astronomer hasn't discovered some new mysterious mechanism, and the guys in the electric universe will look at each other and say, "Yeah, that's another electrical thing. That's a Lorentz effect or something." So of recent times, we have been able, at least among ourselves, to explain a lot of stuff that the astronomers can't and think it's mysterious and not well understood, and et cetera. So I think in the final analysis, what does it mean to people? I think people will be happy that if they understand this whole battle that's been going on and is going on, they will be happy that they aren't being suckered in by a bunch of con artists. Steve Carruthers just this morning was talking about this LIGO, L-I-G-O experiment. And they have spent billions of dollars, and they've discovered the God particle. No, they haven't. They haven't discovered anything. And Steve can prove it to you. The equations they're using are ridiculous. They're wrong. So is the public being suckered by this? You betcha. Yeah. Every one of these new colliders or whatever. No, not the big scopes, the big telescopes. I think those are expensive, but the data that they bring back is fantastically accurate and precise. The astronomers' interpretation of this leaves a little bit to be desired sometimes because they refuse to recognize any electrical causality in that. But I just think it's eventually what we may see. I hope we see. I probably won't live long enough to see it, but I hope that eventually we see that for the last about 50 or so, at least years, if not 100, people have been suckered by a bunch of magicians in peaked hats, and we've made those magicians very rich, and we've gotten nothing for it.